Today's true crime is like a real-life fatal attraction. We're bringing you inside a case with twists and turns you have to see to believe. Could you be at risk of a dangerous obsession? For over 3 years, no one had seen or even spoken to Cari Farver. Yet the entire time, people were receiving threatening emails and texts from her phone. So where was Cari? And was her disappearance intentional? Today we investigate why this single mother left her only son behind and was never seen again. Former homicide prosecutor Anna-Sigga Nicolazzi has the story. Anna-Sigga is here. So what else do we know about Cari?
Cari was from a small town in Iowa. Her mother told me that she grew up pretty much as a tomboy. She was athletic. After school, she had an early marriage. By 23, she was a young mother. The marriage didn't last, so she raised her child as a single mom. She wanted a career in nursing, but after witnessing that first procedure, she passed out.
It happens.
So Dr. Oz, as you may appreciate from there, she decided that was maybe not her best skill set, and she moved on to a different career path in computer programming.
All right, so Cari lived in Iowa, as we showed, and she commuted to Omaha every day for work, where she met and started dating a man named Dave. So this relationship got off to a rocky start. Explain what happened after they first met.
They had a great first date. Everything was going really well. They went back to Dave's house, and that's where things started to get a little uncomfortable because almost as soon as they got there, another ex-girlfriend of Dave's, he won't mind me saying he was a bit of a player at the time, another ex-girlfriend now showed up to retrieve some of her belongings that she had left there, and after that, Cari made a quick exit.
There was no body to find. No blood-soaked crime scene waiting for investigators. No weapon. No final goodbye. Instead, when 37-year-old Cari Farver vanished from Omaha on November 13, 2012, something far more disturbing happened. Her phone appeared to remain alive. Messages began appearing from Cari's number, creating the impression that she had simply disappeared by choice. Her mother received messages claiming Cari had sold her belongings. Other messages were angry, erratic, and increasingly disturbing. But investigators would eventually discover that Cari had not been sending them. She was gone. And someone was using her identity to make the world believe she was still alive. Cari had been last seen after leaving the Omaha apartment of a man she had recently begun dating. 4 days later, her mother reported her missing. 2 months afterward, Cari's vehicle was discovered abandoned in Omaha. For years, the truth remained buried beneath a web of texts, emails, fake identities, and deception. But behind that digital trail was a terrifying question. Who was so desperate to become Cari that they were willing to destroy her? By the summer of 2012, Cari Farver's life had become entangled with a man named David Kropa. Kropa had met Shauna Gollier through an online dating site earlier that year. To him, their relationship was casual. But according to evidence later presented in court, Gollier wanted something more serious and did not want Kropa seeing other women. Then, near the end of October, Kropa met Cari. Their first date was on October 29 in Omaha. During that date, Gollier repeatedly called and texted Kropa. When he told her he was with another woman, she eventually appeared at his apartment building. Investigators later uncovered another unsettling detail. A Facebook account created under a false identity claimed Gollier was in Macedonia, yet that account had attempted to connect with Cari online. The tension intensified. Cari worked near Kropa's apartment, and on November 12, she began a week-long work project that required late hours. She arranged for her teenage son to stay with her mother and stepfather, while Kropa agreed she could stay at his apartment during the week. That night, Cari left work and went to Kropa's apartment. She had no idea it would be the last night anyone would ever see her alive. By the morning of November 13, 2012, Cari Farver was still inside David Kropa's apartment. Kropa left for work around 6:20 a.m. Cari was awake, using her laptop. At 6:39 a.m., her Facebook account was accessed from the apartment. Then the digital trail began to change. At 9:54 a.m., Cari's account unfriended Kropa. Minutes later, her phone sent him a message asking whether he wanted to live together. When he rejected the idea, another message arrived almost immediately, ending their relationship. But Cari's family was receiving strange messages too. Her mother was told that Cari had found a new job. This made little sense. Cari normally spoke with her mother every day, and she had plans involving her son and an upcoming family wedding. On November 15th, another message was sent to Cari's employer announcing that she was resigning and that Shauna Gollier would replace her. Then Cari's debit card was used at 2 Omaha discount stores. The woman who owned that card was disappearing. Someone else was beginning to live her life. But the disappearance was only the beginning. As the months passed, Cari Farver seemed to become a ghost who could still reach into the lives of the people she had left behind. Messages continued appearing from accounts supposedly belonging to Cari. They came from different phone numbers and email addresses, sometimes threatening, sometimes accusing, sometimes creating the impression that Cari was deliberately tormenting David Kropa and Shauna Gollier. Investigators eventually determined that the accounts were not being controlled by Cari. They were being controlled by someone else. And the digital trail was beginning to point toward Gollier. Her obsession with Kropa had made Cari a romantic rival. Now, evidence showed that Gollier had been using photographs and personal information from Cari's real accounts to create fake profiles in her name. But the most disturbing evidence was still waiting to be discovered. In January 2013, Cari's Ford Explorer was found abandoned near Kropa's apartment. At first, investigators found little inside. The vehicle appeared remarkably clean, and only a fingerprint on a mint container immediately stood out. Years later, forensic investigators would look again. This time, they would find something that changed the entire case. Cari's blood was hidden beneath the passenger seat covering. And suddenly, the woman everyone had been searching for was no longer simply missing. There was evidence she had been violently attacked. For years, investigators had a disturbing problem. They had evidence that something terrible had happened to Cari Farver, but they still did not have her body. Without remains, there was no easy answer to the most important question: where had Cari gone? Then investigators began pulling apart the digital world surrounding the case. The messages that had once made Cari appear unstable were becoming evidence against the person who had created them. Investigators discovered fake accounts, fabricated identities, and communications designed to make it appear that Cari was alive and responsible for the chaos surrounding David Kropa. The deeper they looked, the more the deception appeared connected to Shauna Gollier. Then came evidence that was even harder to explain away. Investigators found photographs on a memory card associated with Gollier that prosecutors said depicted Cari's body. They also uncovered evidence suggesting Gollier had been using Cari's identity to communicate with others. The case was no longer built around a missing woman. It was becoming a murder investigation. And investigators were now asking whether the endless messages had never been intended to prove Cari was alive. Perhaps they had been designed to make sure nobody looked too closely at the person who had taken her life. By 2015, investigators were no longer willing to accept the idea that Cari Farver had simply disappeared. The case was reopened and detectives began examining the evidence with fresh eyes. Digital records became especially important because the person impersonating Cari had left behind an enormous trail of messages, emails, accounts, and fabricated identities. Investigators traced that trail back toward Shauna Gollier. Then another discovery brought the investigation closer to a murder charge. A memory card connected to Gollier contained photographs that prosecutors said showed Cari after her death. Investigators also found evidence indicating that Gollier had been using Cari's identity and sending messages designed to make others believe Cari was alive. The physical evidence mattered too. Cari's vehicle had already been recovered, and forensic examination eventually revealed blood beneath the passenger seat covering. Testing identified it as Cari's blood. There was still no body. But investigators now had something almost as powerful: a trail connecting Cari's disappearance, her vehicle, the digital impersonation, and Gollier. After more than 4 years of uncertainty, the investigation finally reached the point where suspicion could no longer remain suspicion. In December 2016, Shauna Gollier was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. The woman who had spent years pretending to be Cari was now accused of knowing exactly what had happened to her. The prosecution faced an unusual problem. Cari Farver's body had never been recovered. There would be no medical examiner standing before the court to explain how she died. No remains to place inside a coffin. No final physical scene where investigators could reconstruct the killing. Instead, prosecutors built their case around the evidence Cari had left behind. Her blood was found inside her abandoned vehicle. Digital records connected Shauna Gollier to years of impersonating Cari. Fake accounts and messages had created an elaborate illusion that Cari was still alive, while photographs recovered by investigators became some of the most disturbing evidence in the case. Gollier maintained her innocence. But in 2017, after choosing to have a judge rather than a jury decide her fate, she was found guilty of first-degree murder and second-degree arson. The sentence was devastatingly final. Gollier received life imprisonment for Cari's murder, followed by an additional 18 to 20-year sentence for arson. For Cari's family, however, the verdict could never undo what had happened. There was still no grave to visit. No remains to bring home. And no simple way to explain how someone could disappear so completely that even death seemed to leave behind a digital version of her. Cari was gone. But for years, someone had made sure the world kept hearing from her. Even after the conviction, one painful question remained unanswered. Where was Cari Farver? Her family had spent years living with uncertainty, watching messages appear from a woman they believed was missing, only to discover that those messages were part of an elaborate deception. Cari's son grew up without the mother who had once been part of his everyday life. Her father died only weeks after she disappeared, never knowing the full truth about what had happened to his daughter. For Cari's mother, the disappearance was especially cruel. She had continued receiving messages that appeared to come from Cari, creating a heartbreaking illusion that her daughter was still somewhere in the world. But investigators ultimately concluded that Cari had been murdered, and Shauna Gollier was convicted of the crime. Gollier later challenged her convictions, arguing that the evidence was insufficient. The Nebraska Supreme Court rejected her arguments and upheld the convictions. Yet a courtroom victory could not restore what had been taken. Cari's remains have never been found. Her family was left with photographs, digital evidence, memories, and a conviction, but no final place to say goodbye. And perhaps that is one of the cruelest realities of this case. Someone spent years creating the illusion that Cari was alive. While the people who loved her were desperately searching for a woman who was never coming home. Cari Farver disappeared in November 2012, but the mystery surrounding her did not disappear with her. For years, her identity continued to move through phones and computers. Her name appeared in messages she had never written. Her accounts became tools in a deception designed to confuse the people closest to her. Eventually, investigators uncovered the truth behind that digital ghost. Shauna Gollier was convicted of murdering Cari and sentenced to life in prison. Her conviction was later upheld on appeal. But there is one thing the law could not give Cari's family. Her remains. Somewhere, there may still be a place where the final evidence of Cari's life lies hidden. And somewhere in that silence is the answer to a question her family has carried for more than a decade. Where is Cari? Her story is a reminder that disappearance does not always begin with a goodbye. Sometimes, the person is already gone while their identity continues moving through the world, creating a terrifying illusion of life. Cari Farver was more than the messages sent in her name. She was a daughter, a mother, and a woman whose life was taken from her. And perhaps the most haunting question is this. How long can someone remain missing before the world finally accepts that they were never coming back? If this story stayed with you, please like this video, share it with others, subscribe to Crime Vault, and turn on notifications for more true crime stories.